What's going on?
Hello, hi Matt.
How are you, brother?
I'm doing great. So, welcome everyone to this Instagram Live. I am Dr. Andrew Kaufman, and I am here with Matt from Cultivate Elevate today. We're going to talk about eye health. So, welcome, Matt. Good to see you.
Hello, hello, and thank you for having me on. It shall be a great topic to talk about.
Absolutely. So, did you think about some subtopics? I know we got some questions from some audience members. Anywhere you want to start today?
So we can start however. I mean, we can go into maybe the why the eyes get weak, just kind of starting off maybe something with that. And then we can move into the UV spectrums. And then I could maybe talk about some books that I can show for people to look into as well. And then wherever you want to go from there, we can just kind of move into.
Sure. And when you say, the eye's getting weak, you're talking about uh, refractive errors as we age, that type of thing?
Pretty much, we were taught that, the eyes get weaker and weaker over time, and that's with the traditional, if we go with the traditional eye professional, they tell us that the eyes get weaker and then they give us thicker and thicker glasses. And that's kind of what I was always taught too. I mean, through my family, they always said you have to get thicker and thicker glasses. And what I realized was these glasses were getting thicker and thicker and they were blocking out the UV spectrum. And as we began to block out the UV spectrum more and more, the eyes progressively get worse and worse. And they're never really addressing the root cause, which is training the eyes or feeding the eyes or pulling the toxins out of the eyes. So, the eye professionals I've realized have kind of duped us with this topic. And as we get older, then they usually tell you need a surgery, which doesn't make any sense, instead of just telling you about how you can start to address the eyes, feed the eyes, and train them again. Because if you don't use them, you lose them. That's kind of how I see it.
Well, it's almost as if the optical community looks at the eyes more as a piece of hardware and, really like an optical lens rather than a living biological tissue organism, right, that is capable of changing and regenerating and repairing itself.
Well, and that's the thing is when I was getting into this topic, I was always told you have to get thicker glasses. And it didn't make a lot of sense, because I realized everything else is regenerating. Like we can regenerate every part of our body. But for some reason, the eye professionals, that's the one that I never heard anything about regeneration. And it always confused me that that's the one that doesn't heal. And every time I would go, they'd put that little thing over your eyes and they'd say like, can you see this? And can you see that? And then they'd just give you, your higher prescription. And I thought, there's got to be a solution with this. And so I started diving into things with pearl powder. This is how it kind of all started. And understanding about how Dr. Wang was giving her patients pearl powder, and it was resolving cataracts. And this kind of blew my mind because I sat there and thought, wait a minute, we can repair our eyes. I didn't know that. And so when I started going into pearl powder, we started experimenting with pearl powder. People started trying pearl powder and their eyesight started getting better. Floaters started going away. Cataracts began to go away. The use of glasses began to go away. And it kind of just blew my mind because once again, it's one of those things that we don't realize we can regenerate. And we're always told that we get these thicker glasses, but we're never addressing the nutrition or lack of training or using our glasses as crutches. Because I realized like, your glass is performing for you rather than you training your eyes. And there was an old device called the stereoscope. I don't know if you ever saw that one, but it took two pictures and you would go forward and back. It was like that. It would make the picture into 3D and you'd go forward and back.
Yeah. Oh, what you're talking about.
Yeah, and it was they would use this, and that would actually train your eyes. And you would notice that after you go far away and you come back, your eyes would be really sharp. And I thought, oh, this kind of makes sense. This is why everybody had stronger eyes back then. And then as we kind of got rid of that, then now the eyes began to kind of fall apart. And through this whole journey of eyes, it's realizing that just you're not taking care of something that requires 25% of your nutrition for the day. The eyes require 25% of the nutrition for the day. So if we don't feed them, if we don't train them, and if we don't take care of them, and they get built up with toxins, then they start to fall apart. Like every organ pathway, you know, if every organ pathway is all blocked up and not taken care of, and there's all this, you know, gunk in there, well, it's going to start to fall apart. So that it's been a journey on this one, that's for sure.
Well, everything you said is, of course, quite interesting and very compatible with what I've learned since I looked outside of the mainstream. But it begs the question, what is pearl powder?
So pearl powder, yes, I should address that, but pearl powder is air compressed pearls. So it's actually just pearls from Mother Nature. They come from clams, and all you're doing is you're consuming pearls. And this goes back to Ayurvedic healing. This is what they've been doing for a very long period of time. They would consume the pearl, and it would bring in the magnesium carbonate, selenium carbonate. It would also address the spleen pathway and also address the liver. It helps boost glutathione. And it's interesting because when I was researching this, I thought, this has got to be remarkable then for healing the eyes. And I started to look at a pearl, and it looks just like an eye. And I started to think about, like, you know, they tell you to eat carrots for, you know, for your eyes. They look like your eyes. So anything that we're trying to address, sometimes we're just trying to eat the same thing to address that. And the most fascinating part with the pearl was that it contained structured water. And you know, fourth phase of water and all of the things related to that. And so what I realized is a lot of the times people's eyes are just dehydrated. You know, you're like, oh, my eyes are so dry. Well, they're dehydrated. You know, there's not enough water in there anymore. And so the dehydration starts to settle in. But pretty much in a nutshell, the pearls are just magical superfoods that have been used for a long period of time. And it's connected to the water, and it's connected to the moon, and all of the energy in that spectrum.
Well, that certainly is really fascinating. It does sound like an expensive food. But let me also just clarify that structured water is in every natural food. So like every, you know, the water in oranges, for example, is structured water, right? And every plant, animal. Now that it could become denatured depending on how it's processed, certainly, but that is a key aspect. And when you eat more raw food, you actually get hydration from the food. And part of the reason that most people, in my experience, are chronically dehydrated, and I see how that contributes obviously to the eyesight, is because of severely dehydrating their food without recognizing it or making up for it in any way.
Well, yeah, and there's a great book, We Want to Live, which goes into the raw primal diet, just like you were describing. And he was saying about it when you're cooking your food too much, which most people are cooking it all the time. Like you said, it's just pulling that water right out. And then you have this like dry food that's left over. And like you said, it's changing the structure of the water. And then you're not having that come into the body anymore. Versus when you're eating directly from nature, like a raw carrot straight from the earth, you know, it still has all that water in there. And like you said, that's the thing that I started to realize, like the eyes need water. Because if you think about it, every time you're blinking, every time you're looking at things, everything that you're going through, it's impacting the water of the eyes. And if that begins to fall apart because you lose that water, then they become dehydrated, and then they start to build up, as people are known as cataracts, which is just really just a dehydrated eye. There's a film going over the eye that's starting to kind of like almost enclose the eye because of the lack of hydration and because of the lack of use, which, you know, our screens, you know, only go up and down rather than side to side. So the eye is no longer even moving in the movement that it's naturally supposed to move.
So essentially, it's like things precipitating out of the, you know, anterior humor becoming a solid structure, right, is essentially what you're saying a cataract is. And I imagine that also the disruption of the fluid flow in conditions like glaucoma is also related to a similar phenomenon, just gumming up the plumbing rather than forming a discrete mass.
Pretty much, you know, the glaucoma situation is pressure. So if your eyes are strained all the time, you know, people are like squinting because their eyes are strained and they're not going outside, they're not spending time in the sun, you know, all these windows and windshields and everything and glasses are blocking the UV spectrum, then the eyes are going to have to work harder after they kind of take those off or exposed to these light spectrums. And then so they build up all this unwanted pressure. And that's what the glaucoma, just lots of pressure in this area because this area is not being used anymore. They're not doing lymphatic massage or moving things or training them left and right. So then there's that pressure built up. And then, yes, on the flip side, the cataract is just your body's natural defense, defense mechanism to protect what you're doing and shield you technically from whatever you're being bombarded with. That's kind of what I started to think about it. And it also relates to toxins in which a person could be eating, and then it's just kind of coming out of the eyes, and then because you got to detox them, you got to detox them somewhere, and sometimes the eyes is where this is being detoxed out of.
Right, and people, may not even realize that the eye has this constant, detox and cleansing cycle, because you think, oh, well, it's only when I'm crying that there are tears, but right, there's constant flow, from one side across the eye and then down the lacrimal duct into the nose, always flushing this out. And I guarantee if we tested that fluid that's running out, we'd find all kinds of unnatural things.
Yeah, well, and that's where, like, you get into contact solution. When I used to wear contacts years ago, like, you're putting contact solution into the eye, which is they're propylene, different chemicals, it's petrochemicals, and that used to always burn my skin. I remember I used to have like severe burns right here. So you can imagine what it's doing to your eyes too, if it's burning this layer right here. But yes, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of toxins coming out of the eyes, and it's all building up. And in our current system, it makes no sense, because they go in and cut the eyes, and they're like lasering and doing all these things. And it's like, we have to address the root cause, which is primarily feeding or training or detoxing, and these are kind of like the three I've started to realize that really are just the main culprits. And if we toss in others, those can be light bulbs, that can be LEDs and these things, which are also impacting the eyes, these altered light spectrums. There was a great book, which I brought a couple books just to kind of throw them in here. But Dinshaw, he has some great work on how light can heal, and certain color spectrums can actually heal. And his books were actually burned by the government. So it's a deep rabbit hole of the situation. But Dinshaw was all about color spectrums and healing, because when we have full spectrums, then we begin to heal. And as we take in every spectrum into our eyes, that's the same thing. We want full spectrums coming into the eyes. When we have these altered spectrums, then the eyes also begin to kind of fall apart, because they're getting this altered blue and altered white and really no red, purple, and yellow. So color spectrums is another one that goes into the eyes.
So are you saying that all forms of artificial light really are not ideal? Or, I mean, I know you mentioned LEDs as being quite unnatural, right, with the emphasis on blue light. And certainly I've heard lots of information about fluorescent lights as well. Most people say incandescent and halogen lighting is the best kind of spectrum for your eyes. Do you agree with that, or do you have a different position?
So this is a big one. LEDs and fluorescents, like you said, most toxic. And LEDs are backed by Monsanto, so that's why definitely most toxic. Number two, if you're going to move into a light bulb, incandescent or halogen, like you said, I think those are some of the better ones you can put into your house. You want a full spectrum bulb, if you can find that. A full spectrum incandescent would be one of the best bulbs you can bring in. And then if you want to take it to the highest level, you can look for a quartz bulb. And the reason I say that is because the old school quartz bulbs allowed the UV spectrum to go through the glass to the body. And that's the most natural, because when you go out in the sun, you get that UV that's natural. Same with these bulbs. So, if you're going to pick, most people will have incandescents and halogens in their house. You want to get a full spectrum. Quartz, you can still find them on vintage stores. If you're looking for quartz bulbs, they're really cool. They're plasma and all kinds of really cool things. But yes, the LED fluorescent push of saving the earth and whatever else is really just a bunch of nonsense, that's for sure.
Well, we know that there's an incandescent bulb that's been burning for like 100 years. So if they want it to make them longer lasting, it's independent of that technology. But and then you, of course, so let's just review the factors that you have mentioned so far related to eye health. So you definitely talked about having proper hydration. You talked about getting exposure to the full spectrum of the sun's radiation, including UV, and many glasses and especially sunglasses will filter that out. You mentioned having the proper nutrition, and that, you even mentioned quite an astounding figure that 25% of your daily nutrition goes to your eyes. And then lastly, we talked about toxicity in the eye and how that contributes and results in problems.
Yep. Those are the primary ones, and I would say the eye exercises, because a lot of people talk about astigmatism. They're always like, oh, I got an astigmatism. My eye is curved. Well, if you think about it, if you don't train the eyes, if you don't move them, if you're not training them in all different directions, then the curvature of the eye begins to change. So a simple exercise just for people to do, you can do eye exercise. You're going right to left, you go up to the corners, you come back down, and then you can even do this with your eyes closed. That's the most challenging. If you close your eyes and do the eye exercises, you will feel maybe tension in this area of how weak that area has become. And then also with looking straight at something, it's the same thing as that stereoscope we were talking about. So you get cross-eyes, which is funny because they tell you don't do that. They'll get stuck together. But what I realize is that's training the eye as it's really close, training your closer vision. And then as you move farther away, you're being able to focus. And as you go back and forth, you can help improve your far away vision and your close vision. And just simple eye exercises can work wonders for people, because if areas of the eyes become weak, then it's going to strain, and then you're going to build tension, and then you're going to get headaches. And this is why, like, a lot of people have tension headaches all the time, is because their eyes are working 2 times harder to try to focus on something that they naturally would. So just simple eye exercises, just moving in all different directions for a couple minutes a day can work wonders. And then if you pair it together with some lymphatic massage where you're rubbing everything and kind of moving things around, getting the blood flow, even though they say there's no such thing as meridian lines on fact checkers, and everything else. But if you just start moving those meridian lines and you get things flowing again, that can also help with the eyes as well.
Okay, so stimulating some lymphatic drainage through some mechanical massage, and then really only 2 minutes a day of these kind of exercises can make a difference. What kind of time frame, and how would you notice the difference?
So you can, yeah, 2 to 5 minutes. I mean, you don't need much, because when you start working your eyes, you're working them. They're you don't, for 30 minutes is a very long period of time to train your eyes. You're going to feel the tension all in here and everything else. But even just 2 to 5 minutes can work really well. And I would do it daily, and I would combine the eye exercises with sun gazing, because I think that's really important too. You can do this exercise while sun gazing, so you get those reds and yellows and orange spectrums coming into the eyes. That I think is important. But just a daily exercise of training the eyes, just being aware, they're part of your body. Like, just being aware of them is definitely something very helpful. And I would say people would start to notice a difference with just doing eye exercises in about 2 weeks, because you're just engaging those muscles. It's just like working out. It's the exact same thing. If you start to engage them, you'll start to notice that your eyes feel that you won't have as much tension. You'll have everything should be a little bit sharper. And then you should also notice you might not have as many pressure headaches anymore because of that reason too.
And if you're wearing glasses, is this something you should do with your glasses on or without your glasses? That's
actually a great question. Do everything with the glasses off, and everything with even contacts, not in the eyes. The problem with the glasses and the contacts is they're acting like crutches, so they're working for you. And at the same time, they're blocking that UV spectrum from coming into the eyes. So if you are training them to make them better, but you're wearing something that is blocking that spectrum, then you can't really go forward. So it's important to do it without. Now, some people might say, I can't see without my glasses. But that's where your stepping stone starts at, And then you want to just kind of work your way up from there with just training the eyes. And there's a great book, just so people are aware of these things. There's a great book, Light Medicine of the Future by Jacob Liberman, that goes into everything related to everything with the eyes. And this was one of the ones that kind of blew my mind, because it goes into the UV, and it's written by person who studies the eyes, and that's all he was doing. And he also wrote a great book called Take Off Your Glasses and See Again, which is funny because they do the opposite when they tell you to wear them, you know. So it's just a great book for people to look into.
Well, really appreciate that you have these resources where people, can basically learn this information. And, actually, I'm really just so grateful that you're giving away all of this information because, this is not commonly known, even though more and more people are waking up to this. But, what we're really talking about, everyone, is that you don't have to be beholden to this pattern of getting glasses, getting, heavier and heavier prescriptions, thicker and thicker, getting worse, ending up getting LASIK surgery, getting cataract surgery, that all of these issues not only are preventable, but you can reverse these, or your body really can reverse these situations when you give it the right circumstances, right? Which is hydration, nutrition, exercise, the right light stimulation, and perhaps some detoxification, which is a big topic that I speak about, but not specifically related to the eye. So maybe if we could talk a little bit about some ways that you could address, what are the worst problems that are most related to eye toxins, and what are some things we could do to support the body reversing and detoxing those situations?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, the worst one I would say is the cataracts. You know, the cataracts is a common one that they come in and they do the surgery. And the problem with that one, so people are aware, is they usually cut the eye and then they usually put a plastic polymer in
Right.
the eye after. So you now have a permanent UV block in your eye for the rest of the time that that cataract surgery has been done. So, you know, that's why when it comes to surgery, I don't agree with any of it. Even LASIK, a lot of people too, a couple of years later, they can't see. They're
Yeah.
completely blind. And that's the perpetual loop of keeping you in this. But so that's those I would say cataracts is the biggest one. Floaters is the next. A lot of people see floaters. It's like snow, like little snow globes kind of floating all around. Now, I have two theories on that. One is there's toxins, and the other is the ether, which is always spinning. So you kind of have a little bit of both on it. But that can be toxic buildup too. When a person starts, like you said, correcting their nutrition, training, detoxing, those floaters go away. Like they should just go away because that's just built up toxins, and you're just seeing them. You're just seeing them through. Those I would say are the two top, cataracts and floaters. The other ones like astigmatism, glaucoma, eye pressure, I wouldn't really relate those so much to toxins, but I would say the cataracts and the floaters would be the biggest. And then with detoxing, people can exercise is crucial. Sweating things out, I think, is really important. As you were talking about with detoxing, first thing that popped into mind is just an enema, doing an organic enema.
So you're talking about doing a full systemic body detox, not focusing on the eye narrowly.
Yes, you can. I mean, a lot of people do castor oil, organic castor oil around the eyes, but sometimes that can pull out too much at once because of the toxin buildup that they have going on. So they put some organic castor around the eyes, and then they're like, "Oh, my eyes are a little, swollen. It's pulling a lot." So sometimes it's also, in my opinion, important to clean out the guts because your guts are connected to the eyes. It all connects right down to the spleen pathway. So if you got a lot of buildup in your guts, you got a lot of buildup in your eyes, and you can try to always target something, but we know that you can't really target things like directly. So sometimes it's best to start cleaning up the gut lining and do a lot of cleansing of the gut lining because as you clean out the guts, it'll also kind of clean out the toxins which remain everywhere else at the same time.
So this is really exactly the way that I teach to do these problems because, there's a lot of places in your body that you could have a local issue, like I think of, for example, an enlarged prostate, right? Or you could have a swollen lymph node somewhere, or you could have a rash on a certain part of your skin or a certain joint that's inflamed, right? So this could be going on, and you can address it locally by, like, for example, using castor oil. And castor oil is a great healing solvent because it can dissolve many toxins that your body has a hard time getting rid of, the fat soluble toxins. And so it can be very potent when used, and it could be used right on the skin and sometimes mixed with things to help it penetrate better, but that's not necessary for the eye, where you can use it right on the eyelid. But if it starts dissolving things out of the eye and the eye says, wow, this is great, we can finally dump this stuff, but your body's not working in conjunction to get it completely all the way out. It kind of then it can go in the local area, right, and cause swelling of the lid, or it could start to go into the blood, like to go to the liver, but the liver's not ready for it, and then it just goes right back to the eye. So in order to deal with that problem, you want to address it locally and systemically at the same time to have the pathway so the toxins can leave that part of your body, but then get all the way out. And a lot of times the pathway to exit is through the gut. It can be through the skin too. And I'm glad you brought up sweating, because that's a really excellent way of getting rid of certain types of toxins. And there are lots of studies that show these things come out in your skin, like many of the plasticizing chemicals, for example, that we've heard of, like BPA and phthalates, which are also in fragrances and cleaners and such. Those will come right out in your sweat, as will heavy metals. So it's good to have a systematic approach. Of course, enemas, water enemas or coffee enemas are very good for the liver and GI tract to dump, stuff from all over your body. Adequate hydration helps your kidneys dump out toxins that are processed that way. Sweating allows your skin to do it, and then you can also simultaneously address it locally. Are there any other local eye treatments besides castor oil that you recommend, or that you're frequently asked about, that you might want to caution folks against?
Castor oil is primarily the number one. You can obviously use coconut oil or tallow if you wish, so that you can put, say, for example, pearl powder around the eyelids. You can do something like that. But yeah, the castor oil is primarily the number one because, like you said, with the toxins. And then, like, the other one I would add is the distilled water, doing distilled water, cleansing this body with distilled water. That can be very helpful too. But I would say those are pretty much the most basic for the eyes, because they're pretty simple. Once you correct the nutrition, once you train them a little bit, once you take care of them and nourish them, they start to heal, and I think that's the biggest thing. And then as we detox and get all this garbage, like you were saying, out of the body, especially heavy metals, because that's, I think, one of the number one culprits of anything. I think that once we pull that out, then the eyes can begin to heal. And the floaters, because, we can't really trust the science that we're told and everything else with whatever. So with the floaters, that could be heavy metal toxicity too. Because I've started to learn, especially in the last, I would say 7 months, how much heavy metal toxicity is contributing to so many things. And the eyes, if you think about it, if you have little heavy metals kind of floating around, in the eyes, you would see them. They would be little dots. So I think just cleaning up a lot of the heavy metals is really, really important, and cleaning out that gut lining. Because like I said, I think you got stuff sitting in there for maybe 30 years if you never did an enema before.
Right. And Matt, there could also be the floaters could be the damaged tissue from heavy metals too, because one of the main mechanisms that heavy metals cause damage is through oxidative damage, right? And it's partly because of the chemistry of the metals being able to exist in multiple oxidation states. And so it could be actually oxidized tissue. Like, for example, in the lesions that we see in the arteries that are associated with strokes and heart attacks and such, those are mostly oxidized lipids, right? Or peroxidized lipids, they're known as, right? So we could have a similar thing with floaters, that it could be, the oxidative damage in the tissue that resulted from the heavy metals. So, it's too bad that we don't have the mainstream scientists looking for these types of causes, because we'd probably be able to pinpoint it much more narrowly. But I think what the big message is here is that doing general detox protocols, and that you don't have to use anything very strong at all on the eyes to achieve these results, but you do need to, have the motivation and the persistence to follow through with these procedures, and to maintain a lifestyle that's not going to just bring these problems back in 6 months.
Well, I like that you said that because consistency is key. You know, if you want to get anything done, you have to be consistent with doing it. And then if we add to that too, which is another topic that we didn't hit on, is Wi-Fi. You know, Wi-Fi can cook the water in the body, even though they say that, you know, it only heats it up a little bit. That's what they say and whatever else. But Wi-Fi can cook the water in the body. So if you think about your eyes, if you have Wi-Fi in the home and your home is not hardwired with an Ethernet cord, you have these unwanted frequencies which are pulsing throughout your home, and that can actually cook the water in the eyes. So while people are doing the detoxing and the exercises and restoring balance of their eyes, they should also be focused on getting rid of Wi-Fi out of their house, because of the fact that all of the spectrums of Wi-Fi are operating at the same spectrum as a microwave, 2.4 gigahertz. You look at a microwave, it says 2.4. Look at Wi-Fi, it says 2.4. So when that's pulsing throughout the house, that can actually slow down people's repairing, because what's happening is their body is constantly being bombarded. So, you know, to add to that, I think that's a really important one. And that was one that really kind of, you know, I didn't really kind of think about when I was, until I read the book, The Invisible Rainbow by Arthur Fistenberg, and all of his stuff with cell phone signals and Wi-Fi and electricity and all of these things. Those frequencies can mess with our eyes too, because they're completely unnatural. And this is why I think when people spend a ton of time in nature, you know, they feel really good and their eyesight is really sharp. Then they come inside and they got all this stuff all, you know, pinging and whatever all over, and then their eyesight begins to diminish. And it's one of those factors, like you said, if science was really doing what it's supposed to be doing and actually showing things of what the culprits were, they would also be addressing that topic as well as all of the ones that we covered in the beginning too.
Absolutely, absolutely. So this has been a really interesting and educational discussion. Should we try and address some questions from the audience?
Of course. And just before we do that, let me just give you two more books so people can take a screenshot, or we can just mention it,
Right.
so people can kind of just have some more information. So you have Dr. John Ott, Health and Light. He was the guy who showed that TVs are emitting X-rays, and he also is the one who showed that the light bulbs are messing with our brains and causing a bunch of attention disorders. So his is one book for people to look into. And then on the other one, when it came to those eye exercises, people can look into Edwin Babbitt's work, and that's Principle of Light and Color, and that's using different color spectrums in front of the eye to begin to heal. And back in the day, they would put you in front of a different colored glass to heal you with different color spectrums based on whichever meridian line was suffering. So Edwin Babbitt's work is another one. And I just wanted to throw those in there so people have ample amounts of resources so that they can learn from.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much for those resources. And maybe Jamie can put those in the notes after this, if it's still viewable after this. I'm not sure how everything on Instagram works yet. Sorry, I'm a little bit of a novice here. Okay, so someone mentioned some specifics about like which castor oil might be the best to use. Do you have any thoughts on that, or should I take that one?
If I was going to say, there's a brand that's called Organic Heritage Castor Oil. It's cold pressed and hexane free. So it's important that you're not putting chemicals into the eyes. And then cold pressed is the most natural way of pressing something, so that you don't heat it up and cook it. So anything that's cold pressed, hexane free, in my opinion, is your best way to go, because it's not being overly processed and zapped and pasteurized and everything else.
Yeah, well, I agree too, because when they extract it, by cold press, that's a mechanical mean, and it's without heat, so it doesn't denature the oil. And sometimes they use chemical solvents to extract it, right, like hexane, which is problematic for cancer and liver toxicity and such. So we don't want it to be contaminated with any synthetic solvents or anything like that. Castor oil doesn't necessarily have to be organic because they don't really use pesticides to cultivate it. So those are really, the most important aspects. And there are several, brands out there with high quality. So, and they're readily available. Somebody also mentioned that castor oil was a seed oil, and that is true, but we're not talking about it as a food substance here. And in fact, it's somewhat poisonous, which is why it's used as a cathartic for certain applications. But in small amounts, topically, it is very well tolerated, and it's not going to cause you to build up linoleic acid in your fat stores like the dietary seed oils are doing. Now, someone mentions my eye vision is better after salt water in the ocean. So you didn't mention the ocean yet, but what can you tell us about that?
So the salt water is very conductive. So in my opinion, that's bringing back the conductivity of the body and addressing the meridian lines. And a lot of the stuff that we're doing with the Wi-Fi, electricity, and all that stuff is kind of removing the conductivity of the body. So that I can definitely see. And then if you think about all the minerals in the ocean, you're kind of getting into the salt spectrums and fulvics, humics, everything that's all of that. You're bringing all these beautiful minerals back into the body. So I could definitely see that someone feels better and their eyes are sharper when they're in the ocean, just because of the minerals. And then you got the oxygen too coming off the waves. All those waves are constantly creating all that beautiful oxygen and moving around the oxygen. So I can see that being a factor. But yeah, I mean, most people who live near the ocean, as they always say, are the healthiest, and then as they kind of move more inland and away from things and away from the natural rhythms of nature, then they start to kind of suffer sometimes. That's at least what I've seen.
All right, well, that's excellent. I certainly feel very invigorated in every part of my body after submerging in the ocean. And when I have that opportunity, I take advantage of it. We have a question about how can we detox from the heavy metals. So I thought I might give my take on that. And I look at this sort of through a threefold lens. So one thing is that it's key that we actually have the right minerals in our body in order to detox the toxic ones, because one thing is our body will actually substitute some of those toxic metals when we're deficient in the trace minerals that we need, and it could actually be a detriment for the body to give up those metals without having the right ones to replace it. So one is that we have to find a form of trace mineral supplement like shilajit or fulvic minerals as a starting point. And then the second principle is that our bodies don't have very many natural mechanisms for purging some of these heavy metals because they didn't really exist in the natural environment that humans did. And they're a result of, industrial pursuits and mining. And they're not, even though the minerals exist in the earth, the forms that we're exposed to are not the natural forms. So we know that sweating is a major mechanism that our body can get rid of heavy metals. So I would always recommend sweating be part of it. And you can achieve this in many ways. Of course, you could use a sauna. But if that's a luxury experience that's inaccessible, you don't need that at all. You can put on, 3 layers of sweatsuits and start jogging around until you are profusely sweating, kind of like how high school wrestlers would cut weight for a match. And now make sure you, of course, hydrate yourself appropriately and wash the dirty sweat off those clothes, because that's where the heavy metals are going to be, and you don't want them to sit on your skin and get reabsorbed. And then the third approach that I suggest is using chelating agents, but not pharmaceutical toxic chelating substances, but natural mineral and plant chelating substances. So things like cilantro, which is extremely potent and well studied in animals for getting rid of heavy metals, and other things like zeolite, bentonite clay, chlorella, horsetail, and there are several others that are very effective. And these are the things that can help your body get rid of these heavy metals. Did you have any other approaches or suggestions, Matt?
No, those are definitely all great ones. You can also add turpentine, which you've talked a lot about. Turpentine is very healing for pulling out those metals. Baking soda, the old-fashioned way. You can do baking soda just to pull out metals. And then that would be pretty much it. But yeah, I like those ones that you said. And yes, we don't want to use the synthetic stuff. You know, when it comes to, like you said, anything synthetic with the vitamins, you know, there's great work by Kalisko. He did the Agriculture of Tomorrow book. And he explained about how when people were ingesting synthetic things and synthetic vitamins, they actually resulted in more health problems than they originally started with. So the whole, you know, synthetic vitamin thing is a rabbit hole. And I found out that the first synthetic vitamin ever made was B1, and it was made by Merck. So, you know, you kind of see, oh, okay, we know why you're making those kind of products. But everybody should, like you said, stick to things from nature and just do natural things. Like you said, put a bunch of layers of clothes on and sweat. You know, it's good for you. Go work out, be in nature, exercise. Those are all great things. You don't always need sometimes the most fanciest thing. You can just do the basics, and they can work well.
Well, I couldn't have said it better myself. And I think, you know, it's kind of interesting that recently the new health secretary had recommended synthetic vitamin A for a quote unquote measles outbreak. And we can find several studies showing that synthetic vitamin A, when given too much, can cause all sorts of toxicity. So I, you know, completely agree that all of the nutrients that we require come from nature. They don't come from a factory or a pill. And while the micronutrient contents in food, in commercially grown food, are certainly not as good as they once were, they're still present. And there's ways that you can eat, you know, get higher quality food to make sure that you have all of those nutrients. And since we are talking about the subject of food, and you know, really the question is, oh, is a plant or meat-based diet better? But rather than addressing that issue, I would ask you, what are the most important nutritional factors for eye health and rehabilitation?
So I would say, you know, when I started to get into this, I was researching into pearl, and I was researching the magnesium carbonate in there, and then the selenium that was connected. And that kind of was the ones that I kind of noticed were the most. Now, it's very hard, as you know, to do really a lot of testing on things, because a lot of times, even when you're testing minerals and you're trying to come up with X, Y, and Z, well, the tests are based on what the testing company can actually test for. And then they could be testing for something, and then I find out they actually tested it wrong, and it was the opposite. So, you know, when people are trying to sometimes pinpoint, and I think that this is a great one that you brought up, when we try to pinpoint something, it's very difficult. And what I started to realize is if we eat from food that's organic as possible, local as possible, as nutritious as possible, we can begin to heal. And the pearls, the carrots, you know, they look like the eye. So I go with anything that you kind of look like something, you eat that so that you can, you know, feed that. And that's kind of been my thing. But, you know, you can go into the minerals of copper, you can go into zinc, you know, you can go into the selenium, the magnesium, all the things that are in there. But I also started to think there's a lot we probably can't even test for and we don't even know. And those things are also feeding the areas. And that's where it gets tricky. And the same when you said, like, even about shilajit and shilajit and everything else, the tests are only limited. And when you go through some of the testing, there's some stuff that you might go, wait, what? I'm putting something that's, you know, radioactive, like, into my body. But everything in life is radioactive. It all is life, you know? So it's fascinating. And that's why sometimes I just sit there and go, you know, we're constantly getting duped with kind of how we're trying to figure things out, and just kind of stick to the natural ways. That's it.
Well, it's, you know, even mainstream science admits that they don't really know what all of the essential minerals that we need in our body are. And, you know, there's evidence out there for some things that would be quite controversial. It's even possible that we need aluminum in small amounts in the right natural form. But I'm not saying that that's true. I'm saying there's evidence to support that, and it may be true because you mentioned selenium. And by the way, I think it's interesting that you mentioned all minerals as being important nutritional factors for the eye, and that's a major focus of my work. But selenium back in the 1950s was considered only to be toxic and not to be involved in biology at all. And now we know it's an essential mineral. And in fact, deficiencies in selenium are implicated in many health issues across the board. So it's important to make sure we get the minerals, and it's the one type of nutrient that it's virtually impossible to get fully adequate amounts from food unless you are able to grow your own food and fortify it with the minerals, which is something that I teach you how to do actually. But it's not practical, I don't think, for most people to be able to do. But your overall message is that you want to get a nutrient dense diet. And then this message of things that resemble the eye may be important constituents. So I want to ask you, what about eating eyeballs, like eyeball soup or fish heads or this type of thing? Have you tried that? Because there is some wisdom, to, if you have a liver problem, to eat liver, if you have sleep apnea, to eat tongue, right? And these types of things, or eat a lot of, cartilage and connective tissue when you have arthritis. So what about actually eyeball soup as a remedy?
So I could definitely see that. I haven't tried it, as I haven't tried it. But this reminds me of like Dr. Jennifer Daniels' work with chicken feet.
Yes.
People having herpes, which is just really skin wounds opening up, and just that's pretty much what it is, lack of collagen. So you eat the collagen to repair the collagen. So same thing with the eyes. Yes, it would be eating the eyes to repair the eyes. And I've started to think about a lot of things with that. Same when people have like pancreas issues, which they say they can never fix. A lot of times when people are eating the organ of pancreas, it helps kick on their pancreas. So yes, I could definitely see where what you're eating is looking like what you're trying to address, and it's almost mimicking or turning back on the meridian lines of the body. And a
Right.
lot of this stuff, like you just said, a lot of people don't do anymore. So like a lot of the animal, like if we just went with the, let's just go with the chicken to make it easy. Most people don't eat the feet. They don't eat the organs. They don't eat the beak and the everything part of it, the eyes and part of that, and the head, and they just eat a skinless chicken breast. So it's like you have this one last piece, and you're going to start to look like a skinless chicken breast over time because you're missing all the rest of the spectrum of what you were originally supposed to be eating. And you see all these cultures, throughout the world. Weston A. Price was actually, they were going around with all the different places and looking at it, and they were seeing that people were eating the whole animal, but only here right now, we're just eating a part. And I think that that can also be a contributing factor because now that you're missing, everything that's in there, in the eye and all of that, you're probably going to start to suffer from those health ailments because you're not eating it anymore.
Well, that totally makes sense. So then I'm gonna give you a challenge. Then the next time we do one of these, then you're gonna have some kind of eyeball recipe for us.
That's fine. The other day I ate a moldy beet because I was learning about mold and molding, eating the metals, and the book from We Want to Live, and he was talking about how mold can eat metals. And I went through this whole research and I tried it. So I ate the moldy beet that was organic and that I've been biting off of, and it was just like this crazy boost of energy. So I think, once again, a lot of things have been inverted, but yes, I'll try to find some eyeballs for the
Well,
next.
I'm just jabbing at you
Whatever,
here
I'll
with this, but
do it. So it's all
it
good.
certainly would be fun to talk about. Or if you try a recipe, take some pictures while you're eating
Definitely.
it. So, all right. Well, Matt, it's been a real pleasure to have this discussion, and I definitely learned a lot today. And also you helped validate some of the things that I learned independently. So I really have a lot of gratitude for that. Why don't we just go over where people out there can find out more information about what we teach, and can be provided with more resources on these health issues?
Of course. So you can go to cultivateelevate.com. We have a whole bunch of resources on our pearl powder, and we have a bunch of studies. And there are some human studies which are on there as well. Now, I know Google has been doing a lot to remove a lot of these, but there are human studies and human trials with pearl. And I thought that that was, you know, I think that's the most important, because you know the in vitro and all that stuff, what really that part is. But there, we have some stuff on there. And then I post up stuff on Instagram and here and also on Telegram all the time about this topic, and just trying to give people solutions on Cultivate Elevate. And that's pretty much what it's all about, because I don't think that anybody needs to sit in fear. You know, we all went through 2020 where they lied to us about PCR tests, and you covered that one, which was all a bunch of hodgepodge and everything else. But they lied to us about all those things, and I'm kind of over it. And I think that just, you know, that should be something that people should realize, that we are self-regenerating beings. And when we understand that, we cannot be controlled by the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds. You know, that's my whole paradigm. So I like solutions rather than fear.
Well, me too. And, you know, they're still pulling the routine with PCR tests and, you know, fake viruses, and they're not going to, you know, stop until everyone decides to just completely ignore it, which is, you know, what we're doing here is we're trying to teach how you can truly attain and maintain a health in your life, and do all the things you want to do, and live the way you want to live, and be strong and not vulnerable to false messages, propaganda, behavior manipulation, etc. And it's really very simple, and this is wisdom that has mostly been around long before we existed, but it's almost been hijacked from us. And this, you know, renaissance that's occurring now in health has really given us the opportunity to not only rediscover it, but also to further expand and hone these principles into ways that we can, you know, have health that we never expected. You know, when I was a young child, always told by the older people what it's like going through life, and that you're gonna get beaten down and lose this and that, and, you know, it's gonna be hard, and you're gonna have to go to the doctors all the time. And, you know, they wanted me to be a doctor so I could take care of them. I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and that's the thing is, when I was going down, also, if we add to that PCR rabbit hole, I found out that they test GMOs to say that they're GMO with the PCR test. So Monsanto, you know, suing those farmers for saying that their seeds fell into somebody's land. That's one. And then I also found out that they do convictions to put people in jail with the PCR test. So, you know, yes, our system is very flawed. And I think this live, or us just talking, is kind of providing some solutions and kind of moving us away from this system, which is just a bunch of lies. And as you said, just keeping people sick. You know, it doesn't make any sense. Like, you can heal people, and people don't have to be in pain. People don't have to be suffering. We had one lady, she was 88 years old, using pearl powder, and she went to the eye professional, and they said, "What have you been doing?" And she goes, "I don't know. I saw this guy, and I started using his pearl powder." Her cataracts went away at 88 years old. So I've started to realize we can regenerate at any time. It doesn't make a difference. It's just us taking initiative and not listening to the Muppets who keep telling us, you know, this and this and this, and you need this. It's like, no, this is the natural way, and we can heal, and that's all it is.
That's exactly right. We've got to become our own health authorities, take charge of the situation, and that's how we're going to come out just fine in the end. All right, well, everyone, it's been a great discussion. We've learned a lot, and please make sure that you go and follow Cultivate Elevate, and of course, hopefully you're following me as well. And go to my website, andrewkaufmanmd.com, where there are several free educational courses that you can sign up for and learn about a variety of health topics as well. So we look forward to the next time, and appreciate everyone's attention during this excellent discussion. Matt, it's really been a pleasure, and I hope we get to do it again.
Thank you, brother. It's been a blast, and we'll definitely do some more.
All right. Goodbye, everyone.
Adios.